Hey, LA Progressive friends and family. This is Sharon Kyle sitting here with my husband and the co-founder of the LA Progressive, Dick Price. And today we are joined by Mark Fancher. Mark is an attorney and a writer, and he contributes regularly to the LA Progressive, and we're all the better for it. And we're going to be talking today about a piece that he's written that's entitled Got Border Problems? Eliminate All Borders. So you're always giving us something controversial. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
So early on in the piece, you say ordinarily discussions about open borders are dismissed out of hand because they're impractical. Uh, and yet some places it's been tried. So why should we be discussing eliminating borders?
Well, primarily because they have become such a source of controversy. I think that there are entire industries which are growing up around it, both in the public and private sphere, and it has reached its most absurd limits, I think, when we have uh, federal agents roaming the streets in masks and, accosting people and arresting people who really haven't done anything that normal people would regard as crimes. And ultimately taking them to places that are undisclosed and the creation of prisons that have colorful names like Alligator Alley and, working out deals with foreign countries to warehouse people. When things reach that level of insanity, I think it's time to get really practical about what we should do about the problem.
Yeah, in your piece, you wrote that sometimes complex or seemingly complex problems, sometimes they have a very simple solution. I don't know if you remember. I'm looking for the piece where you made that statement and you were quoting someone. I don't know if you remember that part.
Yeah, I think I was quoting Kwame Ture. Many people know him as Stokely Carmichael, but one of his little lines that he used is that the problem with poor people is that they don't have any money. If you don't want them to be poor, give them some money.
Right.
Problem solved.
Right, right. And it's really it's kind of convenient. One thing I've noticed is that when the powers that be demonize a group, they first set the stage. It's like they prime the pumps so that it's not so objectionable that these people are treated this way. And I've been watching this really since NAFTA, back during the Clinton administration, when we imposed this North American Free Trade Agreement, where Mexico really got the short end of the stick. When I was living in California at that time, many years ago, the population of Mexican Americans was much less than it is now. We didn't even really have an undocumented problem, but it wasn't until that NAFTA agreement that things started to explode, and other agreements as well. So, can you talk a little bit more about the solution to the border controversy and why you even present this as a solution?
Well, it really is a solution. And when you look at the problem objectively, the knee-jerk reaction to many when you start talking about letting people in is, oh, we're not going to be able to accommodate them. We don't have the resources. We're going to be overwhelmed. We're going to have too many people coming in. But we see the lie in that when it's clear that the only people that anybody's concerned about are people who are brown and black. If you go to Donald Trump and you say, well, I have a plan to bring in lots of Nordic people, he would jump up and turn flips and turn somersaults because he's so happy. He says that those are great people. He doesn't want the people from the S-hole countries, and he said that quite explicitly. I mean, in fact, the only people from the so-called S-hole countries that he wants are the white people, because he rolled out the red carpet for the Afrikaners from South Africa, who were the beneficiaries of an apartheid regime that enforced oppression and racial exclusion and discrimination for generations. So it's really, when you get right down to it, it's really about keeping out the brown and the black people because this country was established as a white country. Everybody wants it to remain white. And when you start bringing in too many people who are not white, then that changes everything. But the problem for them is that nobody wants to be known as a racist unless you're part of the radical racist fringe. And in order to make this palatable, you have to come up with all kinds of other reasons why you want to keep people out. You can talk about the limited resources that are available, limited employment opportunities. You can talk about limited uh, all kinds of resources and opportunities. You can talk about those things, or in the extreme, you can do what Donald Trump did, which is to say that all of these people are horrific, horrible criminals. They're murderers and thieves and rapists. And so you have to come up with other reasons for saying that you don't want them in. You can't say that we don't want them in because they're brown or because they're black. And so that's what it really comes down to. If this country wanted to open up its borders and just let everybody in, they could do it and they could work it out. They could accommodate it. As I said, I think if that were done globally, that it would slow the flow of people into the United States in particular. I think that what has accelerated the interest in coming to the United States is the underdevelopment of the global South. Uh, the northern countries, the imperialist countries, the Western countries have over the generations made life so intolerable in countries that they've branded the third world that people are looking for a way out all of the time. And the only places that seem to them to offer a better alternative are countries in Western Europe and the United States and places like that. And so they try and leave. But if there are opportunities for people to develop their own countries to the maximum potential, to use their own creativity and intelligence and resources to develop their own countries, most people want to stay where they were born. They don't really have any interest in uprooting themselves and moving halfway around the world.
Right. So, as you point out, in a way, we have open borders. We have open borders for multinational corporations, which,
Yes,
if it's to their advantage, they can take their plants to Vietnam or Madagascar or wherever they want to. But people have a lot harder time. Workers have a lot harder time offshoring themselves. And as you say, people grow up in a place they want to. They want to stay there. And the reason they come is not because they're murderers and rapists, it's because our economic system gives them the possibility of a better life, right?
that's exactly right. Yeah,
And isn't it true that our economic system gives them a better life, partly because that same economic system has exploited the resources of these other nations? Vijay Prashad speaks about this in a book that he's written called The Darker Nations. In other words, the global South, and how it's been exploited for both resources, for both labor. And you open up your piece talking about Africa. Can you give a little bit of insight into your mentioning of how Africa was divvied up?
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's that once the slave trade had slowed in the 19th century, then Europe began to look at other things that were in Africa. I mean, Africa is probably, in terms of natural wealth, is probably the richest real estate on the planet. And these people couldn't just sit back and let that go unplundered. I mean, we they had to get it, and they were all fighting each other in order to get various pieces of the African continent that they could exploit. And in 1884 and 1885, the European countries got together and said, hey, there's enough of Africa for us to steal so that we don't have to fight each other. And so they put a map on the table and basically cut it up like a birthday cake giving pieces to different European countries to colonize. And what happens not just in Africa, but throughout the Caribbean and throughout Central and South America and parts of Asia, is that they will go into these countries, they will brutalize the population, they will install puppet dictators in order to keep the population under control. And then these multinational corporations will go in and basically rape and plunder to their heart's content, taking all of the wealth and the resources from a country into the north, specifically we'll talk about the United States, and raise the standard of living for the people in the United States to a point that is the envy of the world. In the countries that they stole from, people are left to deal with an economy which is really inorganic because there may be a decision such as in Ghana where they're going to take the agriculture of that country and convert it to the production of one thing. In addition to taking gold from Ghana, what they did is England in particular wanted to satisfy its sweet tooth by using Ghana as the place where they produced all of their cocoa. And so over decades, all that they were growing there was cocoa for the benefit of England. And what it did is it ruined the ecological balance and the agricultural potential of Ghana because now the soil had been trained to produce only one crop. So that it took away the potential of the people there to even have a diverse agriculture that would allow them to become self-sustaining because they were totally in service to the colonizer, agriculturally, socially, and in other ways. And so that kind of thing has happened so that it leaves people without the opportunity to develop to their maximum potential in the countries where they were born and where they were raised, and increases the standard of living in the United States and other places. And so when they're suffering so badly, and when they start to resist and to speak out against it locally, then the dictator who has been set up by the imperialists whips them back into subservience. And if they don't comply, then they're jailed or they're killed, or I mean, it becomes a terrible situation. And as one of our former presidents said, that yeah, the head of that country may be an SOB, but he's our SOB. And that's the way it works. So it's only natural that when people want to escape that kind of a hellish situation, that they would say, where can we go? Well, the place that everybody seems to be living well is the US. Let's go there. It only makes sense. It's flight, immigration, migration that was produced by the country that is complaining the loudest about it.
That's right. And then that same business model, from a domestic perspective here in the United States, where we know that corporations can up and leave at any time, they use that to diminish the power of unions. Because we have a situation here in the United States where the corporations are free to just go to any country, like Dick was saying, but the impact on the average person and on labor is that we're trapped here. And so we kind of have to bend to their wishes. We have to concede on wages, benefits, union rights for fear that they will move their company to another place where they can extract greater profits.
And here's the wicked neat trick that the multinational corporations play is that when they devastate an area, maybe like the Rust Belt or someplace like that, where they take all the jobs away, they close down all the industries and leave all of the people unemployed. And the people are upset and they're frustrated and they want to know why it is that their communities have been so devastated, and they're looking for answers. Then those corporations say, well, it's because of the immigrants.
Mhm.
They came across the border and they took your jobs. When in fact the corporations took them and located them in countries where they could pay them far less money.
So, as you say, a big reason for the resistance to open borders or immigration is based on race, racial hatred. We don't want black people, we want brown people, and that's the boogeyman that's put up to rouse people to oppose it. But a part of it is, a certain segment of any society, American society, the wealthy white class has built-in advantages supported by the media, by the laws, by the military, and they don't want to give them up. That's why even things that don't have to do with immigration, healthcare for all, which would make a lot of sense, but it would cost those wealthy white people or the wealthy classes some of their advantage. So it's hard to know how you overcome that advantage when the wealthy in a society wield so much power.
Yeah, and even though it's not actual privilege, even those who are white workers and the white poor
Right.
perceive that they have a privilege
Mhm.
because they're white.
Yes.
And in some cases they're correct because in the same way that you described how the institutions have been developed in a way to favor certain people, they intuitively understand, if not consciously, that even if they don't have a dime to their name, that if they're walking down a dark street, they've got a lot better chance of not being harassed by the police
Hmm.
than a black person or a brown person who's walking down that street. And so that means something to them, the fact that they have some sort of favored status, even if it doesn't translate into anything material. And they really don't want to lose that.
Yeah, yeah. It's so for me, the more I research and try to understand the social implications of some of these situations that corporations have set up, the more I see that one of the root issues that have given corporations so much power is the divide and conquer. And they've been so effective at creating this divide and conquer tool by igniting fears along racial lines. And so it makes it very difficult for people who would naturally be allies and would naturally work together because we're all impacted negatively by this very small cadre of billionaires and corporations. I think that in a free society, in a real democratic society, it would be impossible to have a billionaire class.
Yeah.
Um, but we do have one, and it's because they are so effective of using these tools to keep us divided.
Yeah. And the real shame of it is that we seem to fall prey to it so easily.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it is driven by fear. I mean, we look a lot, we spend a lot of time looking at, poor and working class white people and the fears that they have of being outnumbered by people of color. But, we also have this phenomenon of people of color becoming afraid that they're going to become the less favored minority group.
Mm.
Right.
And so that and it's tragic and kind of pathetic that many would limit their aspirations to being in a place where they can take the leftovers and the scraps that the society has, and that all that they aspire to do is to be first in line to get what's thrown away by the dominant class. And when they see other groups uh, appearing to, or at least in their imagination, competing for this place in line to get what's set aside for minority groups, then they turn on the new group that they perceive to be a competition for their position as the favored minority. And I think that it manifests in many ways, but I think we saw some of that in the recent presidential election, where you had a substantial number of people in the Latino community who voted for Trump, with the idea that, well, we have established ourselves here, and so therefore we will be recognized as full-fledged members of U.S. society. And now these other people who are not going through what we went through in order to achieve lawful status here in this country are going to be competing with us. And so therefore, we want Trump to succeed in keeping them out. So therefore, we support Trump. Or you have, Black people who will go so far as to not only oppose Spanish-speaking people coming across the border, but who will oppose Black people who are coming from the Caribbean or from Africa or other places because they don't want to lose their favored position.
Yeah.
And
I
it's tragic.
It is. It is. I was told by a Black person that I wasn't entitled to reparations because half my family immigrated to the United States from the Caribbean. And so I'm not a technically Black, I'm not a Black American. I'm not an African American. And I never heard of anything so ridiculous in my life.
Yeah. I mean, and it goes back to what Dick was saying earlier about the global reach of those who are responsible for all these problems. I mean, in the same way that now they will create sweatshops in low-wage countries and things like that, without any impediment to their doing business in that way. The slavery was a global industry in the same way. It could not be separated and parceled out according to geography. It was part of an international phenomenon, and the same people were profiting from it. Those who were profiting from it, because of slavery in Jamaica, were profiting from what was going on in Brazil and what was going on in Guyana and going on in Louisiana. I mean, it was all part of the same thing. So we who are not part of the international capitalist class, the imperialist class, we tend to see things through a local prism and we tend to compartmentalize everything based on borders and boundaries that have been set for us for precisely that reason, to
That's right.
keep us focused on only that which is perceived to be local, while those who are responsible for oppression globally have the entire world as their playground.
That's right.
And that's the way they see it. And we can't defeat that as long as we stay within the little boxes that they put us in.
That's right.
We have to, as part of our resistance, understand that it has to match them in terms of where they are attacking. And they're attacking people who are the same as us. They just happen to live in a different geographical place.
Right. And
But they're attacking them all over the place, and we're further consolidating the boundaries and the borders that separate us.
you're absolutely right. Dick, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So, I mean, we can have this intellectual conversation about borders and how to get away with them. But on a practical level, you point out, well, within the 50 states of the United States, it's easy. We can just move back and forth, and we have open borders in that sense. And to some extent, the same is true in the European Union. Can you see of any other kind of examples, or how the example in the European Union is working out, of where borders are coming down?
No, I've not looked at that specifically, but what I do know is that before he was assassinated, Muammar Gaddafi, as part of his effort to bring about Pan-Africanism, was looking at, I mean, he was concerned about xenophobia, and I think it meant a lot to him because he had opened up his own borders in Libya. And when Black people came into Libya to work, many in the Arab population in Libya reacted in much the same way as many of the MAGA people are reacting now.
Right.
And so the same kind of thing was happening in Southern Africa. And so there had been a lot of talk about just opening up the borders in Africa to allow for the free flow of populations. But this was one of his great sins in the eyes of imperialism, along with his interest in establishing a Pan-African gold-based currency, and in other ways bringing about a single unified African government for the continent, which is why many of us are absolutely convinced that the CIA and others were responsible for his death at the time that it happened.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we do know that, like you said, in the United States, anyone who wants to, like I did, I was born and raised in New York. I'm free to leave New York and move to California, and I have the same rights in California that I have in New York. And to a certain degree, the same is true in the European Union. I think we're all old enough to remember when the European Union was created. In fact, I had visited Europe before the European Union, and you'd have to use your passport to go from country to country in Europe. And now you don't. Once you arrive, you can go from Portugal to Spain to Italy without any problems. And they've also opened up free movement for labor and have experienced a tremendous improvement in their economic strength as a union, much stronger as a union than they were as these individual countries. So breaking down those borders have helped them. Now, it hasn't come without negative consequences, but the positive definitely outweighed the negative in terms of economics and having the ability to work from state to state.
Yeah.
So, well, you've given us a lot to think about, Mark. I want to encourage people to read this piece. Dick, you're scrolling up. I wanted to look at the title, remind people the title of the piece that Mark has written, Got Border Problems? Eliminate All Borders.
Right.
And I love it. I love it. We need to think along these lines and especially think about, well, who benefits from us having these borders?
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, even if we're not able to get the machinery of government to do what we know would resolve a lot of these problems, if we can begin to do whatever we can to help people to transform themselves spiritually and otherwise, to just recognize the shared humanity of all, and the practical value of us coming together as people, and understanding that we're all family, regardless of where we are geographically. That's a very potent kind of a force to unleash in the planet, because the whole objective has been to persuade us that we're divided by these lines and that we should not come together, even emotionally and spiritually.
Right.
But I think that if there is that level of enlightenment where we care for people outside of our borders, then that's a fatal blow that can be struck to the system which has been set up to keep people oppressed.
That's right. Well,
yeah, wonderful, Mark. We love your articles. We look forward to the next one. We love talking to you. We are so glad that you take a little bit of your time to talk with us.
so people who are listening, people who have read this piece, please, if you haven't already done so, share with your friends and your family. Please subscribe and encourage your networks to subscribe. Now more than at any time in my life, we need the progressive voice out there. Thank you, Mark.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you guys.
All righty. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.